This is going to be a blast. I'm going to talk today about data literacy, what it is, what it's not, and how to achieve it. Again, this is going to be for people who showed up early. We kind of chit chat about the webinar. This is going to be a series of talks. There is no way I can cover everything in data literacy in an hour. In fact, I can't even get through all the basics of it in an hour. However, we are going to progress over this series of lectures. This is live streamed to YouTube, as Dr. Smith has shared with all of you. So if you miss anything, you can hear it again. So let me just progress. So this is just a background on EWS Solutions. As of July will be our 25th year in business. We've had, what a blessing it's been, consulting at all these amazing organizations. 25 years went by pretty fast, Anne-Marie.
We're not that old. It couldn't have been 25 years ago.
I'm just warming up. So anyway, we've had over 150 client partners, and really data literacy is a popular topic now. We've been doing this stuff since the beginning because when you work with and manage data, you need to build the literacy of the organizations you work with. This is just a background slide on me. Please read this at your leisure, but I did include my email address. If anybody has a question or you want to understand how to jumpstart your literacy program, I can give you some additional advice. Also, we have a data literacy masterclass sitting at datamanagementeducation.com. It's a college grade course, very in-depth. Anne-Marie, did you want to say something? I heard you.
I just wanted to say, if you email David, please don't email him about the certificates.
For whatever you do, do not email me about that. And especially Meryl, I saw what you put in the I'm watching you. I am Sicilian, remember this. Anyway, let us, little joke. All right, let us talk about what we're going to hit today. I want to talk to you about, I want to give you a good background and fundamentals on data literacy and understanding that data literacy has different meanings. It's different for an individual as opposed to an organization. I want to talk about data literate thinking and what it is and begin to evolve that. I want to talk about data literacy for our chief data officer, because I just, let me bury my lead. Data literacy is on most CDOs' big rocks, key things that they need to achieve. And then I'll walk you through at a high level some of the major components of literacy. Let me stop talking about what I'm going to talk about and get into it. Let's get to background and fundamentals. There are all kinds. So one of the challenges when you are in a field which is evolving, which is growing, is that there's all kinds of definitions. I'm just going to give the bottom one because I think this is really where data literacy is going to go to. Data literacy is the ability to create, manage, read, work with, and analyze data to ensure and maximize the data's trust, accuracy, and value to the organization. That's what it's all about, is leveraging the data fully, rather than, so every organization, at least that we work with, always talks about being data-driven. We want to be data-driven. But if you're not using data, if you're not letting the data, so take a step back. I've had an I was working in data warehousing way back at the beginning of the field when it just became a concept. And I'll share something with you. The dirty secret of analytics nobody brings up. You're about to learn it right now. The reason why you build an analytic is to change people's behavior. That's why you do it. If people are just going to hold their finger up and make a decision based on Twitter or based on how they feel that morning, then there's no reason to build them a data analytic. It doesn't matter what the analytics are on if they're not going to change their behavior. And that's the purpose for any kind of enterprise analytical reporting or business intelligence. It's all about changing behavior. And that is why data literacy is so important, because if you're not data literate, why are you going to trust the data or understand how it can be valuable? All right, let's hit data literacy for the individual, and then we'll talk about data literacy for a company. So when we talk about somebody being data literate, first off, they are not afraid to let the data teach them something. We have dealt with people, I know I've had this experience where some folks, they don't want to know what direction the data is pointing at because they're afraid of that. They're afraid they're going to have to change something. Well, guess what? A data literate person wants to know the truth. They want to get to that. And they're willing to let the data drive their decision making rather than gut instinct. When we get into the ROI section of this course, when we do that, I think in July, I will share with you just the terrible statistics on how basically the higher up the corporate chain you go, the less data-driven people tend to be. So that's a big problem. Anyway, a data literate person understands the limitations and possible inaccuracies within our data. When we get into accuracy of data, we'll learn that there is no such thing as 100% accurate data or data that has zero bias. By definition, all data has bias. Anyway, let me continue. A data literate person understands these things and they're able to see the value of using data as long as it's accurate and from the right sources. They want to expand their skills and competencies in data literacy. And they really see the need for literacy and will support it in all relevant areas of the organization. So I went one slide too quickly. So we look at data literate capabilities. A data literate person can understand data, so they know what it means and also what's missing in it. They know how to find and obtain the correct data. They know how to read, interpret, and even evaluate data. They understand how to manage it. They understand that data, number one, needs to be managed. It doesn't just happen on its own. Having taught data management for a long time, I like to use an analogy for any of you parents out there. If you don't force your child to clean up their room, is it going to get clean? No. In fact, what's going to happen? It's going to get dirtier and dirtier. That's the gravity of our businesses. It will pull down and wreck our data naturally. And if you don't do something to fight off that gravitational pull, things will become quite a problem. Data literate people can create insight using data and the right data sets. They know how to take data and make it into a strategic benefit for the organization. So when we talk about data literate thinking, there are 6 major ways of thinking, which are all data literate. One is critical thinking. This is a skill, oh goodness, may I get on my soapbox for a mere moment? What a lost skill critical thinking is. People who go, especially in the age of the internet, where people will do a search and it's written by like a blog written by a 12-year-old in their mom's basement, stoked up on sugary beverages and eating Doritos constantly, and they will take that as fact. Critical thinking, heck with it. Well, we need critical thinking because critical thinking is about being open to different assumptions or conclusions and being willing to adopt new ideas and perspectives based on quality data and information. Scientific thinking. For anyone like Anne-Marie or myself, which we have gone through the PhD process, are we better for that? I don't know, Anne-Marie. Well, Anne-Marie's odd. I will tell you, anyone who has worked on a PhD, a dissertation, all has nightmares on it, except Anne-Marie. She enjoyed it, and that makes her scary. That makes her very
I loved it.
She did. I mean,
I did.
I don't know what to say, but that's terrifying to me, Anne-Marie. That's very scary. Don't mess with Anne-Marie. This is trouble. Anyway, scientific thinking is really what you see in that kind of academic research. It's about the knowledge of the scientific method, principles like triangulation, and the ability to apply a scientific approach to formulate and test a hypothesis. Statistical thinking, the knowledge of how statistics work and how to apply them, especially to quantitative reasoning. When we talk about quantitative, think quantity, numbers, things you can measure. Qualitative, think quality. It's something that you can study, but it's very hard to measure it numerically. So statistical thinking, very important. Visual thinking. When we talk about visualizations in our analyses, this is what we mean. Many people, most people think visually. And it is all about the ability to understand and interpret information conveyed visually through graphs, charts, and other means. Skepticism, the willingness to question our data and to go beneath the surface of it, to understand its context and in which the data was created. Anyone who's heard me speak about metadata management, I always talk about the data gives us content. The metadata gives us context. And content without context is meaningless. I can go to Anne Marie and say, Anne Marie, 24, 38, 40. And
Hike.
She'll look at me, hike, exactly. You'll say hike. See, that's exactly. But that's not, because what did I give her? I gave her content, but no context. It has no meaning without that. And then last but not least, and this is one, I have to say, Anne Marie was the first person I ever heard speak on data ethics, probably close to the last person too, because this is a topic nobody pays enough attention to. But ethical thinking is part of data literate thinking. It's about understanding the potential good and the potential harm from interacting with our data and drawing conclusions from it. So ethical thinking to me is a seminal component of data literate thinking. It's all part of it. And if you don't believe that that hits the bottom line, if you think that's ephemeral, ask Marriott with their multiple $100 million fines from GDPR. Go ask Citibank with their 25 plus billion dollars of fines for poor data management. And I could just keep going down the list, Google included, by the way. So these are big issues, and a lot of it does go back to ethical thinking or the lack thereof. Anyway, let me continue. So I've walked through some of these already. I forgot I was going to go through each one, but let me just see here if there's anything I want to add. I talked about quantitative and qualitative. I feel like I've covered all of these, so I'm going to keep going. We've talked about data literacy for the individual, for you and I. What does it look like when we talk about data literacy for an organization? What does that look like? Well, let's take a look. I've been using this slide and people tend to really like it. The data literate organization needs to define its data ethics. If you have not defined your data ethics, then you do not have data ethics. The data literate organization must adhere to data privacy and security. This is important. The data literate organization has invested in data governance at an enterprise level, may I add, not just a department here or there or some gloss over, but you have built outstanding, what I would call world-class data governance. The data literate organization has enterprise data that is secure, accurate, timely, consistent, authoritative, reasonable, well-defined, has accurate syntax and an appropriate format. These are for our data quality management experts in the audience. If you're thinking, wow, these seem a lot like the 8 dimensions of data quality, that's where we get it from. Anyway, the data literate organization has invested in metadata management. And I'll expand on this concept as this presentation continues. But when you think about data governance, I want you to think about the people processes. How do a group of us together make decisions for our organization? It's the people processes. Metadata management is the technical backbone of data management. It gives you the who, what, when, where, how, and why of your data. And without that, we really can't do any of this stuff. So it is foundational. Any organization who thinks they're going to build data governance without a metadata management component, a significant one, you're going to fail. Now, I didn't say you may, I said you will, because I've seen this enough over the last 25 years. Let me continue. I could stay on that soapbox for quite a while more. The data literate organization, it invests in data science. Data science is not something you just do to check a box. It's about really testing hypotheses and having the results drive our decision-making process. And good data science uses that scientific thinking that I listed earlier. It understands that bias exists in any analysis. And it tries to manage it. Let me give you an example of that. Anne-Marie, I just built an analytic. You'll really find it fascinating. In this analytic, what we have learned is that every adult, which we are defining as 18 or over, who lives in the United States over the last 5 years, all of them who passed away, all of them who are deceased, have eaten a carrot. Therefore, we have perfect correlation, 1-to-1, between eating carrots and being deceased. Is that a good analytic? Is that good data science?
No.
It's awful, right?
It's horrendous.
And it's
causation does causality.
Correlation does not always equal causality.
Yes. Thank you.
Exactly. And that's a very obvious example, right? But we see this in the real world where we're doing analytics on supply chain, analytics on profitability of policies. This stuff can all impact you. But let me continue. I have so much more. The data literate organization. Their decision makers understand how to access their data sources, how to work with data, interpret it, and avoid data analysis errors like the one I have shared. And this is important because if you look on this slide, we also see data privacy and security, yet we're talking about accessing data. I have seen companies error on both sides of this tightrope. I've seen them be the wild, wild west, where they let anybody write a report hitting production systems and pulling data out. We've seen this plenty of times. That is abominable data security and privacy, and you're just waiting for a giant fine or to be in the newspaper. We've also seen the other side, where organizations lock up their data so tightly that an actual analyst within a department who has full authority to see that data can't even get to it, or it takes months to even get a data set. Both are problematic, and there needs to be a balance, a yin and a yang between the two. Let me continue. The data literate organization enables data-driven insights through advanced analytics, business intelligence, artificial intelligence, and machine learning, along with visualizations. These are all critical tools in the data literate organization. Last but not least is the chief data officer. The data literate organization has an executive who is responsible for data. If your chief data officer is an army of one, then they're a small c DO, because they don't have a team, they don't have a staff. This is a department. This is something that they should have budget for doing their work. This is what, in one slide, to summarize what a data literate organization looks like. Any questions? If not, I will continue.
No questions yet, Data.
Awesome. When we talk about data ethics, so what I'm going to do is, from this slide, I'm going to sequentially go around it and just hit each topic in just a little bit more detail, so that you all have a good view of them. Data ethics. Data ethics are the standards of behavior that promote appropriate judgments, conducts, and accountability for collecting, managing, and using our data. We want to protect civil liberties, adhere to regulations, minimize risk, and really maximize public good. Unfortunately, much of data ethics, where it does exist in the company, which is rare, basically targets regulations. But if you are running your organization ethically to start with, whatever regulation comes down the pike, you're probably in a great place to deal with it. Sound ethics. I want to jump right to the learning point. Well, a couple things. Data ethics are much more than generic statements. They are reflected in your data policies through your data governance organization. your data policies, standards, and rules that are enforced throughout an organization. Because sound data ethics solves many of the future legal and brand erosion issues that are about to occur in your organization. That's why you want to target this. All right, let me continue. Data privacy and security. This is about the data and information security that protects the privacy, confidentiality, and competitive advantage of our information assets. Effective data security policies and procedures ensure that the right people can use and update the right data in the right way. I have to say, I'm nearing the end of building an enterprise data strategy for one of our client partners, and a lot of it is similar to this bullet point of the right data to the right people at the right time, delivered securely and in the most efficient way. Is a quick example. We want to restrict all inappropriate access and updates to data, and good privacy and security should be clear, thorough, and binding to anyone who has access to data. Data governance. It defines the people, processes, framework, and organization necessary to ensure that an organization's information assets, your data and your metadata, content and context, are securely, formally, properly, proactively, and efficiently managed throughout the enterprise to secure the data's trust, privacy, security, meaning, and accuracy. This is why, along with metadata management, data governance is a foundational component to any organization. We're working with a very large entity right now. You would all know who they are. And the two areas of focus that they have, one is data literacy, the other is data governance. And data governance includes the metadata management pieces. Those are foundational. And data stewardship, when we talk about that, it's the process of having people, data stewards, work with the data and metadata of an organization. Let me continue. This slide, one of my favorite slides, at one of our client partners over, I think, multiple glasses of wine at dinner.
Yes.
I was challenged by our sponsor to summarize data governance in one visual slide. So let me walk you through this slide quickly. It's one of my favorites. Data. So we have a person. Look at this poor fellow here to the left of your screen. He has eye strain. That's why he has glasses on. His sleeves are rolled up. He sweated through that shirt, I assure you. And he needs to make profitable decisions. However, when he's looking at the data is misunderstood, it's inaccurate, and it's misleading. That is how the data looks like for just about any organization that we see. That's the default position. And really, for people like this, he doesn't even know what he's looking at, let alone being able to trust it to make a profitable decision. So what happens? Data governance comes in with policies, procedures, consensus, knowledge, information, data, and metadata. And you see the data stewards. Are any of these data stewards working alone? Nope. They are working across the enterprise. They work with others to collaborate on this information, and they take this data and they make it understandable, they make it accurate, and they make it consistent. They're really transforming the data into information, or a term that I love, actionable information. It comes from the military. It means, hey, when boots hit the ground, we have actionable information. We know we need to go left, we need to go right, or we need to stay put because we're going to get shot at if we go left or right. So it is actionable. We know what to do with it. So this is data governance, quick overview. Metadata management. Let me hit this. Metadata is a type of data that digitally describes the who, what, when, where, how, and why of an organization's data, processes, applications, assets, business concepts, and other things of interest. As I've mentioned to you before, how do we get information? We combine content, which is data, with context, which is metadata. That's how we do it. Okay, and this just summarizes. You cannot do any of these tasks, any of these programs, whether it's advanced analytics, master data management, any of these things without the who, what, when, where, how, and why of your data. It's as foundational as it gets. Let me continue. Data science, what is this? Data science is an interdisciplinary field that uses applied statistics, machine learning, AI, scientific methods, processes, algorithms to extract insights and knowledge from structured, semi-structured, and unstructured data. And I like this little chart here because it shows, hey, it is really the convergence of what we used to call statistics and mathematics with computer science and IT and a deep domain knowledge of our business, whatever that is. If you're a large government agency, like a Department of Defense or Department of State, that's what that means. That is your domain. That is your business knowledge. And when we combine mathematics and statistics with great IT practices and technology with deep domain knowledge, that convergence really rolls into data science. Advanced analytics. Advanced analytics are part of data science and grew from the early data warehousing and business intelligence efforts. It uses high-level methods and tools that focus on projecting future trends, events, and behaviors. And here's the big thing to understand is advanced analytics has specialized tools and technology. We have things called ETL tools, extract, transform, and load. We have analytical tools that provide that front end for our business users. And they really target the 6 major types of analytics: prescriptive, diagnostic, descriptive, predictive, cognitive, and automated. Let's look at each one. Anytime you see a list like that on a slide, you have to think, I'm going to explain each one, and you're correct. All right. When we talk about diagnostic analytics, it looks at past data to determine what happened and why it happened. So we're looking at the past. We are not looking at the future. Descriptive analytics. This presents what's currently happening in the business. So if I look at Anne-Marie's blood pressure over the, every month for the last year, that would be an example of diagnostic. We're looking at the trends in it. But what is her blood pressure now, especially as I've just mentioned her name in this webinar in front of 100+ people? Now it goes up. That's descriptive. It tells us what's happening. Anne-Marie, do you like that analogy? That was a pretty good one off the cuff.
It was very good, David. In the descriptive analytics, what is it happening right this minute? Why?
Exactly.
You have to know why. Just because my blood pressure went up doesn't tell you anything.
Exactly. The fact that I'm on the webinar with you probably would explain it all. But anyway,
that would explain a lot, David.
That would be the why. Anyway, predictive analytics presents likely scenarios of what might happen. We used to call this more commonly forecasting. We're trying to say, hey, what is going to happen in the future? By looking at the past is not a perfect predictor, but a good predictor of the future. Next, number 4, cognitive analytics. Cognitive analytics looks to mimic the human brain by drawing inferences from the data in some kind of recursive manner. It's a self-learning feedback loop. Think recursive. Back in the day, I actually used to program with some of the early AI languages. I'm actually shocked to see that they still exist today. So it's a recursive loop. Decision-making trees, neural networks are all great examples of this. Automated analytics, another popular one. This is where we're looking to use analytics to automatically make business decisions. Let's suppose Anne-Marie wanted to apply for a new credit card that she doesn't own. Rather than having her talk to someone, if we looked at her credit score, the number of delinquent payments she's ever had, I would think we could automatically just grant her that credit card, because for those who don't know, Anne-Marie doesn't miss payments. I mean, that would be insanity. Anyway, so last but not least, prescriptive analytics. These present what actions should be taken based on a current business situation. These are the 6 major types of analytics that we use.
Now, David, everybody who's data literate doesn't need to work in all these types of advanced analytics. In fact, I would submit that most people who are data literate wouldn't know that there were 6 types, but they're still data literate. Am I
That's right.
right or am I wrong?
No, Anne-Marie, you're absolutely correct. What people should be able to understand if you're data literate. So in 2 more webinars on this topic, I'm going to go through data literacy levels. And data literate, think of it as that baseline literacy of, hey, if you work with data, you have to at least know this. And you should be able to know when you're looking at an analytic. Are we talking about today? Are we forecast? Are we looking at the future? Are we looking at the past? That much we should know and have a general understanding of what that means. If you have our CDO or somebody who leads an analytical team, then you have to be at that expert level, meaning you need to really have a deep knowledge. Somebody who based on their job needs to be at an expert data literacy level, then they would need to know all 6. But for the overwhelming majority of people, that's not the case.
Just to know how to use analytics in general and know that they exist and how they can help in either the operations you're performing or the decisions you're expected to make. Your example of my applying for a credit card. Yes, it's automated, but if I don't know what's happening behind the scenes, what data they're looking at, I won't know whether I should even consider applying for a credit card or whether the answer will be what I expect it to be.
Exactly. And you're touching on really a more holistic data literacy view, because that's getting into privacy, security, ethics. How much data do we have to pull from you for this? Is it encrypted? Are we protecting it? Like if they're like, hey, shoot us an email with this, they're like, I don't know if I should give my
I don't think so.
email. Yeah, you shouldn't. Any emails can be intercepted.
Right.
I will right now, and probably are. Anyway, great question, Anne-Marie. Thank you.
And as people have been asking about the slides, they're on the website. Where you registered, the webpage, datamanagementu.com, webinars, go to that webpage. All the slides are there.
Exactly. Such a deal.
Yes.
Let us continue. The CDO, the Chief Data Officer. This is a corporate executive who's charged with creating business value from our enterprise data. What are the tasks they typically have? Digital transformation. This is 20 years ago, we called it re-engineering. Now we call it digital transformation. It's probably had a couple names in between that I'm neglecting, but it's really about taking a company with archaic IT systems or poor architecture and re-engineering, rebuilding them all. That's digital transformation. And many times the CEO is tasked with this, and something I've had the opportunity to do several times. And boy, it is a long road and a difficult one. IT footprint reduction. This is one that most of our companies have piles of needlessly redundant data. So many times the CDO is looking to go in there and reduce this IT footprint because it's expensive. Data management, critical task. Many times we're seeing it fall under the CDO office. Monetizing data to create new revenue streams. Absolutely something that the CDOs target. Their typical mark is 8 to 20% of gross revenue is the typical target here. Data governance, CDOs are pulled into that and are charged with that overall to implement. Advanced analytics, I've spoken enough about that. Data privacy and security, I've spoken about as well. Although some companies that we're working with actually have chief information security officers, and those companies, they've broken this task off from the CDO. CDOs use things like net promoter score. If you're asking what the hell is that, it is nothing more than the percentage of customers rating their likelihood to recommend your company, product, service, or agency. And it's the classic thing is a 0 to 10 scale. And a lot of times CDOs are charged with upping this net promoter score. We live in a world of social media. We live in a world of upvoting and downvoting. That's what we live in. And this impacts companies. Last but not least, the last 2 here are not the least. They are vitally important. Enabling a data-driven culture and enabling data literacy. And again, as I go through this webinar series, I will Illuminate, we are building the largest data literacy program in the world right now. That we are partnered with a massive agency. And I will tell you, there's a right way to do this and a wrong way. And I definitely want to illustrate that as this series continues. But let me continue.
David, we have a question.
Please, I have an answer, I hope.
I know you always have an answer, and I know you'll have it on this. At some point in the future, we've been asked to have a presentation on the CDO, the role the CDO has, the journey the CDO takes, the skills the CDO needs, et cetera, especially for the purposes of the last 2 points, enabling a data-driven culture and how to instill data literacy in their workforce. The question wasn't so much a question for now as would you consider doing that in the future?
Of course. Anne-Marie has my phone number. She can find me. Absolutely. The CDO position is one that's so important. And it's one that I like to joke that CDO stands for career die overnight, because many CDOs can only hold on to that position for a couple of years at most. Because many times, like, first off, when you look at this list, this is an extensive, demanding list. And sometimes companies and agencies don't have the stamina to do these correctly. They expect the CDO to make impacts on all these in 6 months. And that's not realistic in many cases. It needs to be built iteratively. It needs to be an agile approach where we can implement this in time, not trying to do big bang and waterfall kind of implementation. So the CDO is put under a lot of pressure. Plus, it's a newer position. Many of the people who've been raised into that slot don't even have the right background to do it. So it's a real challenge. So I'd love to talk about that position and best practices and ways to really succeed as a CDO, because I've experienced a lot over this career in companies making the right and the wrong moves and the differences. Great question. Okay, this is my last major speaking slide. When we look at data literacy for an organization, all of these components that I've walked you through work together. Data ethics, data privacy and security, data governance, these all feed into each other. And I've spoken about many of them, but let me hit a couple that maybe I haven't yet. Data quality management, goodness. This is a topic. At one time, there were conferences strictly on data quality. You don't see that much anymore. Data quality as a concept has been somewhat subsumed by data governance or assimilated, like the Borg in Star Trek, just taking everybody and gobbling them up. We've seen that in data quality management, but people who really understand the 8 dimensions of data quality, the best practices that really we took from manufacturing and the work Deming did and evolved under Larry English and guys like Tom Redmond today and other wonderful thinkers. This is as critical today as it's ever been, because bad data quality leads to big time problems. Metadata management I've spoken about, but let me hit these next two: communications and socialization. Communications and socialization are not the same thing. They are synergistic, but they are not synonyms. When we talk about communicating, it's how do we convey one thought to another individual, or really to a group of individuals. And you want to make sure to communicate well. We did a webinar a little over a year ago on data governance, organizational change management, where I walked through a communications plan. I walked through a socialization plan. Go watch. All of our webinars are on YouTube. Go to YouTube, type in EW Solutions. You'll find all of them. I walk through stakeholder analysis for a communications plan. Much of it's the same for literacy. Like I'll give you one gotcha. When you build your literacy program, don't you dare label anybody as data illiterate. Unless you want to get hung from the tallest tree, you never state that. So as we're building these programs for our client partners, one of the things we do, we have automated assessments to gauge people's literacy. We don't share those with the individual. It's something that's a numeric value that goes up to the CDO office. And none of those values mean illiterate, even though we kind of know when they do. But it helps us gauge what kind of training people need, and we make sure to do it all automated, which is the way to do it. I'll talk more about that later. But communications is important because if you communicate poorly, if you offend a lot of people, guess what? The pushback will be a tidal wave and you'll be swept under. Socialization, what is that? And how does that differ from communication? Remember, communication, how do I take a thought or a concept and give it to another person or group of people? Socialization is, how do I change people's behavior patterns? How do I get somebody to turn left instead of right? And that's a different thing. It's kind of getting everybody onto the same way of thinking. And there are many techniques for that. Again, I would strongly urge you to look at our webinar on the topic. I did a whole hour on this. Metrics and KPIs. KPIs, key performance indicators, in case you wondered. Super important. Let me state this clearly, and I will develop this in time. If you can't empirically measure the literacy of your teams and companies, then you have no data literacy program. You need to be able to measure it consistently, reevaluate it with academic best practices. So if I ask Anne-Marie, I'm trying to think, I want to ask you a real question, then I'll ask a leading question. So let's suppose I want to gauge Anne-Marie's knowledge of mathematics. I want to increase her knowledge. If I ask her in my assessment question, Anne-Marie, what is the square root of pi? Now, don't answer that because you may remember that. You know, good. So Anne-Marie's little inside baseball, Anne-Marie's father was a history teacher, so I know better than to ever bring up history questions or literature because she will know the answer regardless of how arcane it is. So I went with mathematics, Anne-Marie. That was the plan.
I noticed. Math is hard.
So math is hard. Anyway, I ask you a really hard question. Let's say you don't have the answer to it. But then I give you some kind of automated training, and then my math question is, what does 1 + 1 equal?
37?
Exactly.
Or is it 11? It might be 11.
It very much could be. Or if you have I remember when my daughter was in grade school, they would call it hockey sticks or goalposts because there were 2 of them. But anyway, yeah, it equals 2. That would be an easy one. That's a very biased analysis, and it's a terrible way to do it. So anyway, you need to have it be automated because you cannot do this in a face-to-face manner with an organization of thousands of staff. Anyway, so those KPIs allow us to measure all this. Next, it's last that I'm talking about, but it's certainly not last in our hearts, technology. Some of the technology that we have available today is a blessing. It has evolved in so many different ways, in so many areas of literacy, that it allows us to do this in a way that we couldn't have done 15 years ago. So anyway, if you go to our website, ewsolutions.com, we actually have a whole section on literacy that'll show you a little bit of what we're doing. But let me wrap this up, Anne-Marie, because we're in the home stretch.
Yes, we are.
In the final analysis, data literacy differs between the data literacy of an individual and that of an organization. Don't neglect the organizational change management component of data literacy. It's significant. It is very significant because I will tell you, having done this enough times, the second you say you're going to have a data literacy program, people are going to panic that you will stamp them as illiterate. So that cannot happen and will destroy your program. Enterprise data literacy programs are automated. If you think you're going to do this manual, you can't, not for a company, unless your company's 10 people sitting in the same room. You cannot do it. You have to be automated. You got to be smart, diligent, and patient when you do that. When you do this the right way, you are going to achieve absolutely astounding results. Anne-Marie, I'm going to take a swig of my water. I'm going to let you hit me with every question you got. Bring it. I am ready.
One thing I would say before we start with the questions, and I've been answering them as you were talking, is that although improving data literacy through training can be automated, instilling the culture that enables people to want to become data literate and then to improve their base level of data literacy to higher levels can't be automated because it's cultural.
Yes, the cultural change is fantastic point. As you know, that's its own area of study. As much as you and I have done a lot of work in that area, there are whole PhD programs just for cultural change management. And you look at things like the William Briggs cultural change curve that I spoke about. These are seminal concepts. They're difficult. And here's the trick, Anne-Marie, you know this. It has to fit into that company's culture. And guess what? Companies don't have a uniform culture, not globally. The culture for your China branch is going to be different than your America branch, is going to be different than your one in Nigeria. There's just going to be cultural components that differ, and it needs to address all of it. And it's very complex. So to your point, fantastic point.
Thank you. And while you were not taking a swig of water, since I made a comment and you responded, while you take that sip of water, I'll read a question. We had several that I've answered, but I think this one is worth bringing out for just a minute before we wrap up. How do you assert to leadership that data literacy needs to be a core value and an operating principle of the business so that you can do the continuing education and you can establish that base of literacy and then raise it incrementally or periodically? How do you do that? In other words, it doesn't happen in 5 minutes.
No, it doesn't. I wish, Anne-Marie, I wish it did. So I will share.
But actually, we don't, because then we wouldn't have a job.
Well, that's exactly right. Then we'd be on a beach somewhere. Anyway, so how do you do that? Number one, this is a complex answer, but I'm going to try to abbreviate it. The first thing I like to do is look at the strategic goals of an organization. If there's something like, we need to become data driven, we need to embrace technology, we need to evolve, those kind of concepts, I want to leverage those concepts in my pitch to the executive managers. The second thing I want to do, I want to find specific pain points in an organization. I'll give you an example of one where we had a company of financial services. They were about to send a data file out to a regulatory body. If that file went out, they would have been on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, and not in a good way, in a really bad way. The kind where you lose 15 to 18% of your market cap. It would have been that kind of a story. And a data steward who didn't even have the title caught the error before it went out. It's a great example. They were not data literate. They were very immature. Everything was heroic effort. Nothing was process driven. So finding those real pain points, those real stories, I think resonates great. I don't want to burn up my time. I could give you another good example, an automotive one where there was a recall. Everyone would know this company. There was a recall on a part. $400 or $500 checks were sent up to thousands and thousands of people. One of the people who received the check was the sitting CFO. What's the problem? Problem is the CFO didn't own the car.
Mm-hmm.
So he got a check that he could cash, and he didn't own the car. Oh goodness! When he got back into the office, there were people who were workers of that company. Good data literacy practices would have prevented that. So I would look for those real pain points. Anne-Marie, give me the next one because I know we only have a few minutes.
Actually, we're done. So it's ready for our final session.
Take us home, Anne.
I will do that. Thank you. In conclusion, David, thank you very much. This is the start of an entire series for data literacy. So you might have thought that we didn't cover much in data literacy today. Well, we did, but we'll cover much more in subsequent sessions. If you subscribe to datamanagementu.com, you'll receive a notice for every webinar. So you can follow this whole series of data literacy education by attending these webinars. If you're really interested in becoming a master of data literacy, then I recommend that you look at datamanagementeducation.com. As the Vice President of Education for EW Solutions, I can tell you that the course there is excellent, as well as the course in data governance that takes you through all the areas of enterprise data management that are important to data governance. Please come back next month, where we will have a fireside chat with David and the Executive Director of the Business Analysis Institute on the conversion of business analysis, analytics, and data management. Thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of your day.